Hello, and welcome to Fantasy Writing for Barbarians. I'm John Negroni. I'm a published fantasy author with over 11 years of experience as a professional writer and editor. Now, talked about a little bit recently, we haven't been able to do video in a while, and that's the main reason why I haven't been able to do any prologue critiques or any first page critiques. So the main issue is I've been having trouble with the video recording stuff. However, had the idea the other day that maybe what we can do, and yes, this will also be audio only, as those of you listening to the podcast know, but we decided, you know what, we don't necessarily need to have me on camera. I can just share my screen, what you're looking at, and we can read along there. So what we're going to do today is we're going to take a look at the first page of something that I technically have not read yet. I opened up the file and I kind of glanced at it and got ready, but as usual, I want to react to it off the cuff. I just kind of prefer that. And just kind of give you my live reaction. However, this was curated, of course, by our wonderful producer, Natalia Emmons, who assured me this is going to be a fun one. And just for those of you who may be new to the podcast, the whole point around fantasy writing for Barbarians is to try to help aspiring or emerging fantasy authors just get a little bit more insight into the things they can do to polish up their manuscripts. And this is all coming from the perspective of somebody who I'm an editor, I'm an author, I've been doing these things for a long time, as I said at the top. And yeah, I really want to make sure that as we go through this, that for those of you who might, sometimes we get in comments people being a little bit like harsh toward the writers here. And I don't know if this is going to be any good, to be clear, but that is not the spirit of what we're trying to do. We are, of course, trying to help people, just write cool stuff. That's the whole point. That's what we're up to. Okay, so this comes to us from, as you can see on the screen here, I actually don't want to read the username because it's a bit, mad respect, but, I don't want to get demonetized here. So I'm going to say FD. So we're going to go there. FD writes this, and it's not the real username, I guess, to be clear. They wrote, "Let's try this again. Critique request." And they specify that this is dark fantasy. It is 4,166 words. Now, for the purposes of this video/audio podcast, we are just going to look at the first page as we typically do. We would be here for quite a while otherwise. And also, it would take not just a long time, but, it's a little tiring to read like that much, especially live. So we'll just look at the first page. First page is obviously very important, and we can see how this person gets started. And they do have a little blurb here as part of the post. And I forgot to mention, this is part of our fantasy writers, the Reddit or subreddit for fantasy writers that we typically like to frequent. So let's look at this here. So FD writes, "About a year ago, I submitted the first few chapters of a novel I'd been tinkering with to this subreddit for critique. At the time, I was just writing as inspiration struck and had not planned anything out or fleshed anything out. I was quickly advised of this in no uncertain terms. While my first instinct was anger/frustration, I instead chose to follow my second instinct, which was to use the experience to better myself. I've taken the last year to actually do the work, meaning map out the plot of my novel at a 500-foot level as I would a D&D campaign, as well as doing character mapping, world building, and the like. Some twisted, masochistic part of me said to drop the first chapter of version 2 here to see if the work was at all worth it. So here she is. Please be gentle. And I'll do my best to be gentle. Don't worry. But also, I see there's at least one other comment here. So we'll see what somebody else had to say who might have taken a look. And my quick response to this blurb too is we've been there, we've put stuff out that wasn't ready, and we've been met, with folks who I think on this subreddit too, there can be a lot of like, hey, if you're going to put things here for us to critique and to look at, please give back as well, right? Like, please also, read other people's work. Don't just, throw all your stuff into the subreddit and expect everybody to do all this work for you. I think I don't know if that's necessarily what this person is referring to, but I have seen that kind of sentiment being floated around the subreddits. And so I totally understand and sympathize with that. And I think in this case, it's really cool that they have taken a year to really work on this. And, it can be fun and a little scary to put your work out there for sure. And I'm happy to see that they've been mapping things out and really just trying different things. Maybe some stuff didn't work, maybe some stuff did, but that's all part of the creative process. You're doing the right thing by trying different things. And let's see how this goes. and I think when you say, like, if the work was at all worth it, again, I think the fact that you went through this process, however it nets out for this particular project, it's going to be worth it, because the process is the destination in many ways. The whole struggle of it all it's like getting experience points in a video game. It's all leading up to something. And no matter how this one shakes out, but I've done enough filibustering. Let's actually take a look at this excerpt. So I'm going to open up right here. Okay, so the excerpt here. Okay, Fey Veins Bleed, Chapter 1. And I've mentioned this before. I personally tend to prefer getting at least like some kind of intro or some kind of like, hey, here's the kind of novel I'm doing. All we know is it's dark fantasy. And that can be a little bit tricky for us as editors because we do want a little bit of like, how are you packaging this? How are you thinking about it? In the same way that when you go, I've talked about this before so many times, but like when you go into a bookstore, it's not like what you see on the shelves are first pages. You see cover design, illustration, you see fonts, you see things that kind of like give you a frame of reference for what you're going to read. And so always like, encouraging people who send their critiques out there to do just a few things. It doesn't have to be this super long cover letter or query letter or anything like that. Just something to kind of give us an indication of how we would expect to see this being presented, in their ideal scenario where it is in a bookstore. Okay, but we're going to go through this anyway. Fey Veins Bleed. My first thought about this, I'm looking at all this text. I would definitely, so this is Google Docs. What I would do is I would definitely increase the spacing. It would be a little bit easier to read. It doesn't have to be like double space, I don't think, but right now it's kind of stacked. I think part of the problem is I think the Courier font sometimes can be a little tough to go through like this, but it's not terrible. I'm kind of nitpicking here. Another thing I'm noticing is there's a lot of double spacing after the sentences. You don't need to do this. I would actually encourage you not to do this. It's kind of distracting, honestly. And so, yeah, I would maybe take a look at some other kind of like manuscript formats. Always be thinking of readability for folks, the easiest way for them to read something. And I'm going to go through this first page. I'm going to do very limited pauses. I will let you know where I would stop reading as an editor, or if I was an editor and I was, for example, considering publishing this, either for Cetera magazine or if I was doing it for a publishing house, whatever it is, I would let you know like where I would stop and then start, doing the rejection letter, whatever. If that happens, it might not happen on this page, hopefully not, but I'll let you know then. But I'll keep going through the whole thing and then we'll do all the feedback at the very end. So let's go. All right, Fey Veins Bleed, Chapter 1, and interesting title. I definitely like it. It kind of takes me back a bit, and I can imagine on the cover of a book. I do like it's like 3 words and they're short, and you could easily do like a little cover, a book cover, and make it look good. So sure, and definitely I'm getting very dark fantasy, maybe grim dark, because it's maybe horror even if we're going that far. But anyway, I'm gonna do my special audiobook voice, so I hope you enjoy it. I saw somebody commented that they liked it when I did it for one of the other ones, so guess we'll keep going with that.
Eben awoke with a start in the pitch black of night. For a moment, as he had for as long as he could remember, he had to fight down the terrible fear that he had gone blind. After taking several steadying breaths, he recognized a small amount of light peeking into his room from under the door, as well as from outside his window. He continued to slow his breathing until his heart rate slowed and his blood pressure lowered.
This is about where I would stop reading. Yeah, just about. I would maybe give it one more sentence, but I've pretty much not there. But okay, I'll keep going.
Rising from his bed, Evan pulled the sheet and blanket into perfect hospital corners with nary a wrinkle to be found. His pillow lay neatly at the head, looking as if it was brand new. Straightening, Evan silently padded over to the window and looked out into the night sky, where the moon was rising out of the horizon, following after the sun that had set about an hour ago. Another deep breath, and Evan turned from the window, beginning to prepare for his evening. A few feet from the foot of his bed, a desk sat against the wall, bare except for a single cherished volume sitting at the top right corner of the desktop. The dark wood was polished almost to a reflective finish, and the dark brown and almost black grain of the wood shone in the early moonlight. To the right, a chest of drawers made of the same wood sat against the perpendicular wall, just next to the one window. Eben pulled a dark maroon towel off of the top of the chest of drawers and grabbed the necessities out of the top drawer and opened his bedroom door and with a deep breath stepped out into the hallway. As his feet transitioned from hardwood to the plush red carpet with red carpet? Oh, I think they mean R-E-D. Yeah, because he didn't read this carpet like a book. Okay, sorry. As his feet transitioned from hardwood to the plush red carpet with stark black scrolling lines decorating the edges next to the wall, Eben paused, listening for the sounds of his siblings. From the silence he figured he was either the first to rise or the last, and either was fine with him. He did not mix well with most of them. nor most people, for that matter. Eben moved silently down the hall to the communal bathroom, took a quick shower, and was just as silently back in his room within 10 minutes. Still, not a soul seen or heard. From his small armoire he pulled a custom three-piece suit made of material so dark it was almost vantablack, enabling him to even more easily move in shadow, and to do so with style as well. Tonight he was working, so he went with black on black, silk tie tucked into his waistcoat with precision, checking his suit in the mounted on the inside of the armoire, and finding everything in order. Eben combed his stark white hair back, making sure the undercut was coiffed just right. His black boots, while shined to almost a mirror finish, were custom jaws that would allow him to move effectively and quietly.
Okay, so I read the first page, and then I finished the paragraph here, so just like a quick sentence. All right, so overall here, the good stuff. I think that FD has kind of like, I can tell they worked on their descriptions. I can tell that they had a priority to make sure that you could imagine the scene, that you could be in the scene, that it's described in a way with, good synonyms. It's not purple. It's not hitting me over the head with atmosphere. It's letting me fill in the gaps of atmosphere with just the right amount of stuff. There are a few lines here that I thought were kind of nice, perfect hospital corners. I mean, it's such a simple way to describe and characterize this person kind of making their bed. I think it's just, and with nary a wrinkle to be found, that's a nice little flourish of the voice. There are a few things like that. I would say that, for the most part, it's a lot of description, and that kind of gets into the core problem with this and why I stopped reading after the first paragraph, because I got the sense of what was happening here. Part of it was, I could tell, like, you used slow twice in this sentence, and it was very awkward, and it just immediately took me out. And so I did give it another sentence, and then I kept going, but then by the end of the second paragraph, I definitely would have been done, because here's the thing. Here is, overall, the fundamental issue. Nothing happens here. Absolutely nothing. We watch Eben wake up. He makes his bed, he looks out a window, he takes a shower, he gets dressed. This is something like 400 words, and it's a morning routine. And the only real characterization I get, I mean, I can infer that he's kind of, I guess, clean and, well cut, clean cut or something like that, is this area here where you say, from the silence, you figured he was either the first to rise or the last, and either was fine with him. He did not mix well with most of them, nor most people for that matter. This is classic example of telling, not showing, right? You're telling me that he doesn't mix well with people. Now, you don't have to show instead of tell for everything, but if this is a key component of who this guy is, you need to show me that. You can't just tell me that. The idea of somebody being kind of like isolated or not mixing well with people, that is rife for potential to show me through action and some intrigue, some propulsion, why that is, how that is, and what that feels like. And so when I saw this especially, I was like, all right, we are almost at the end of the first page, and then we do get to the end of the first page, and again, nothing happens. And I can kind of peek into here too. It's just, there's some like interior, like navel gazing here, considering his profession, like nothing. So for me, the core problem is that we don't have any kind of inciting incident. Now, when people say that there should be an inciting incident, sometimes I think in these critiques, you might hear that and you might say, well, hold on, it's the first page of chapter 1. We need to set things up. What's the status quo? I'm not talking about the inciting incident of the novel. I'm talking about the inciting incident of the scene, right? Every scene should be a microcosm of the story itself. It should be a story within itself that can almost stand on its own, even especially at the very beginning. And so there needs to be in this first page something that indicates the story. Because to me, where is the story, right? Something needs to happen. A letter needs to arrive, an assassination attempt, a magical disaster, the protagonist discovering something impossible, something, right? All we get here, though, is a guy wakes up, makes his bed perfectly, showers, dresses in a custom three-piece suit. And the other aspect of that that's, I think, a core problem for me is that you're doing character introduction through mundane action. This is a very cliche thing. It's something that is definitely advised against, of like the cliche of we start the story with a character waking up and going through their morning routine. And again, all we really learn here is that like Evan is kind of disciplined because of how good he is at making his bed. He's isolated because he doesn't mix well with others. Works at night doing something kind of shadow related, I guess, because of the suit. But this, to me at least, is the least compelling way to introduce a character. We're being told he's interesting enough or interesting through a wardrobe choice rather than being shown through the actual conflict or him making decisions or having to make decisions under pressure. I also would point out that I kind of see what's called the cool character problem happening here. It's kind of a trope, kind of a cliche too, I guess, but the whole like white hair with the undercut, the custom Vanna Black suit, kind of moves silently, works in the shadows. This, because you mentioned D&D, this kind of reads like a character sheet. It kind of reads like a list of qualities, a collection of aesthetic choices without any interiority. I don't have a voice to this character. I don't have any kind of personality beyond like brooding loner who dresses particularly well, like that kind of thing. I think you really need to up the pacing here. The prose is moving at one speed, which is slow, deliberate. Every action is getting the same weight throughout this. You need rhythm variation. Making the bed should have or shouldn't have as much narrative attention as putting on custom shadow work gear, right? There needs to be a rhythm where things have different lengths. But I'm not picking up on that. I'm not picking up on any urgency, forward momentum. I think that some of the fantasy furnishings here are a bit generic. Like, it's not the way you describe them, because you're describing them in ways that are functional and effective, but the things themselves are kind of generic. Like, it's a dark wood desk, it's a chest full of drawers, it's a plush carpet, scrolling lines. The cherished volume thing, it doesn't really get any payoff, at least within these, like this page. I don't think that these details are doing enough to world build. To me, they're just kind of like coming off as like furniture that's there to be furniture. To me, I'm asking myself at the end of this, like, what makes this world fey, right? Where's the strangeness, the magic, right, that the title is kind of promising? So my suggestion for the writer here is you should just start, in my opinion, and take it with a grain of salt. You know what the shape of the story is, not me, but you should start with Eben already working. He should be in the middle of his job. Maybe he's on like a rooftop. Maybe he's stealing something, killing someone. I don't know what your story is. Again, or sneaking into some place that he shouldn't be. I want to meet him in the action. I want you to weave those character details in through his choices, his reactions to obstacles. I know that it can be kind of like people can get kind of annoyed by that advice of like starting in media res and that whole concept of like, well, not every book needs to start with like a sword fight. But it's less about the action. It's less about the spectacle and the aesthetic of that. It's more about watching a character under pressure and dealing with something. It's the quickest way to get emotionally invested in a character, to like a character, right? I think that if you start with a moment of change, where something changes, where something goes wrong, somebody turns out to be someone they're not, something inhuman happens when human is expected. Anything like that, like somebody showing up at his door covered in blood, like one of his siblings showing up at his door with like a weapon in his hand and blood on him. That's how you hook people. That's how you get people to be like, I got to keep going, right? So I think for me, what I'm seeing here is I see the writer is doing the work, the plotting, the character mapping, the world building, and that's awesome. They're doing great stuff there, it seems like, but they need to work on how to open a story. They're still kind of writing as if the readers are going to wait around for like 10 pages while the protagonist is getting dressed. I think modern fantasy readers in particular, whether I get it, people like to lambast modern fantasy because it's not as much of a slow burn, and why can't we have the slow burn, first 50 pages where nothing happens? I'm sorry, but modern fantasy readers, they like pace. They like stuff in this kind of post Sanderson Abercrombie market. They don't have the patience. They're going to bail by the third paragraph. And I'm sorry to say that is just the case. It's the reality that you're working with here. And the kind of slow burn thing that you might be interested in, that you might want to do, you have to earn credibility to get away with that sort of stuff. But if you are still kind of working on your craft, you have to work your way up to, I guess, that privilege, if you want to call it that. Although me personally, I think like once you start in the propulsion and those kinds of character moments, for me, like you might not want to go back. It's just, it could be a little bit more fun to write that stuff. So yeah, my advice would be, depending on the shape of the story overall, I would try to cut basically everything before Eben leaves for the job. Maybe start there, maybe start in the middle of the job itself. I think could be even better. Start as late as possible. I love that advice. I've heard it so many times from folks, and I think for the most part, it tends to be true. And I think you can backfill those character details as needed. Overall, your first page needs a hook, right? And a hook can be a lot of things. It can be a question that needs to be answered. It can be a mystery, a threat, a discovery. Right now, it's not that. It's very kind of, it's like a shower and a very neat bed. Yeah. I think the planning work for you did pay off in at least one way, where like the prose is clean and controlled, right? I think that you have an understanding of how to follow the sentences. Like Eben awoke with a start in the pitch black of night. I can see that. And like, I'm like, okay, well, why did they awake with a start? Right. And you kind of give me a soft answer to that question in the next sentence. And you give me some intrigue here of like fighting down the terrible fear that he had gone blind. That's giving me something to work with. And I'm like, oh, you paid off the question here, but you raised another question while answering the question. Now you kind of lost this as we went on, right? Because then it started becoming description and like what's going on in like the room and then some characterization. But what you can do is you can instead keep this laddering effect and go give me more of that characterization through, again, decision-making, pressure points, stuff like that. Okay, I think that should do it. I do appreciate this person sending their stuff. It can be scary to do so. And I think that, they have a lot of things going for them here. I think that they just, need to do a little bit more work with that. I want to take a look then and see if we can, I think there was a comment that real quick. Okay, yeah, there's somebody left a comment. I think there's just one comment though. Okay. So they wrote, "Hello, I'm glad you decided to share this." Oh, and this is from Illiterate Clavicle. I like that username. Before you continue reading this comment, I'd like to preface this by saying that this is all just my own personal opinion and insight. You're welcome to agree or disagree with any of the points I bring up, and also, please be aware that none of this was written in bad faith. I hope you can write the best possible version of your story. Overall, it is a fun read, but there are a few things bogging it down, namely, separate your paragraphs. I'm not too well versed in the art of paragraph breaks, but bouncing all your writing together into a big wall like this put me off when I first looked at it. That's interesting. I wonder if they changed it after the fact, because they didn't look like that to me. Maybe it happens later in the excerpt. The opening. Eben wakes up and dresses. I'm sorry to be blunt, but this is boring. There's a reason a lot of people hate openings like this, and that reason is boredom. We do not know Eben. We are not attached to or invested in him and his habits enough to sit down and read endlessly about him doing mundane things. We can skip to him walking with Velk, and absolutely nothing about my disposition toward anything in the story would change. I'm glad we read this, because they read the whole thing. So they're kind of saying the same thing, like cutting to this moment of walking with this person named Velk. I totally get why they would have the same thought there. And then they said, writing nitpicks. After taking several steadying breaths, he recognized a small amount of light peeking into his room from under the door as well as from outside his window. This is the third sentence of your opening, and it feels bloated from the prepositions used here. If you use too many to describe a simple image, it'll sound wordy and hard to piece together. Yeah, I agree with this. He continued to slow his breathing until his heart rate slowed and his blood pressure lowered. Straining, Evan silently padded over to the window. Yeah, your writing suffers from repetition and redundancy. Going through every word of it would make this comment way longer than necessary, so I picked two examples from the beginning. Yeah, and this is where I stopped reading, because it was like this weird kind of like slow his breathing until his heart rate slowed. It's like there is a much cleaner way to say that, and that definitely, like, again, it like took me out. And then like his blood pressure lowered. It's like three things here, and what is it really telling me? Like, it's not telling me that much. I don't feel like I got much for the effort of piecing this together, if that makes sense. What else to say? In the first, it has already been established that he was breathing steadily. Unless it was remarkably hard for him to breathe slowly and the writing was trying to emphasize that, there is no need to repeat this fact. Maybe if you wanted to add something more to it that we didn't know previously, sure. But here, the entire sentence feels obsolete. It doesn't add any meaning. It just says what was said before in more words for no reason. It also breaks the narration's tone by putting clinical observations of his heart and blood pressure, which makes me feel like I'm watching him in a hospital room and not his bedroom. That's a good point, too. In the second, the verb pad already means to move quietly, so slapping silently on it just diminishes the action and makes the sentence wordy. And this, I think, is kind of a nitpick, but, fair enough. Out of his own volition, he willingly consented to signing the contract. Everything here already carries the same connotations as the other words, so what's the point? Yeah, this is kind of what I was talking about, like, everything kind of has the same weight to it, where some things don't feel as urgent as others, even though they probably should. I.e., if something doesn't add any new information to what was previously mentioned, cut it or reword the sentence for it to do so. Of course, there are times when repetition can be useful. So if you want to set a scene where it is a conscious choice, feel free to do so. I had originally planned to write more down, but some things have come up, so I'll stop there. If I find free time, I'll try to finish this review of your story. Cheers. Well, hopefully they take this to heart and, I see what they said here too, right? Like, be gentle, and hopefully we were gentle. I definitely didn't want to come off as like I was trying to be unnecessarily harsh or anything like that. That's what, when you ask for critique, I think that what you have to do to kind of like hit that next level is you do kind of have to go through these cycles of just people giving you the hard truths, right? Giving you the kind of like, the reactions. And like, I agree with that commenter of like, this person can feel free to agree or disagree. I don't know how to transition out of this, so I'm just going to end it right there. Thank you so much for listening to Fantasy Writing for Barbarians on this first page critique with us. Hopefully we'll be back soon for more stuff. And thank you, as always, if you're a subscriber. And be sure to keep on writing if that's what you feel like doing.